to Dynamics Development. I'm Jason. If you happen to like everything you see on here, please subscribe, like the content. I'll be releasing information about once a week. Today's clip is part one of a two-part episode. We're going to introduce some of the tools that you're going to need for Dynamics development, and then get into actually developing a console app, which would act as a Azure resource, which we can publish to Azure as a web job. So in doing this, some of the things that you'll need, first you'll need a Dynamics instance to work with. If you don't have one, you can create one by going to trials.dynamics.com and set yourself up with a trial. Move around a little bit, get familiar with the interface. Once you've got you a trial instance of Dynamics 365, it is a cloud application platform that you can use to develop applications that integrates with the Power Platform, Power Apps, which allows you to very quickly generate model-driven and Canvas apps. Aside from having your Dynamics 365 instance, you're also going to want the XRM toolkit or the XRM toolbox. This is free also. In the toolbox, there's various tools that come in extremely handy when you get into customization of development. So you want to download the XRM toolbox. You can get that from www.xrmtoolbox.com. Again, there's various tools in there that are extremely useful, and we'll get into the toolbox in later episodes. You'll also want to have Visual Studio. Visual Studio has a way of integrating with Dynamics and your Azure resources so that it makes custom development of your applications much more streamlined, much more efficient, much easier to handle. Plus the tie-in with the NuGet packages, it's very nice. Now with Visual Studio, you can get various instances. I use Professional. You can go to visualstudio.microsoft.com/downloads. You can get the free web version, Professional, Enterprise. It's up to you. Visual Studio is my preference. You're more than welcome to use other sources. I'll be using Visual Studio. Now to tie into Azure, Visual Studio, it, like I said, nicely ties into Azure and publishing apps to the Azure resources. So you'll want an Azure subscription. You can get an Azure subscription trial, azure.microsoft.com. So now that we've got our tools, we're going to step in a little bit to some custom development. And so we will launch our Visual Studio. Now in doing this, we're going to create a web job. This is a very basic console application. So we'll just come in and then go to File and New Project. And we're going to create a .NET Framework console application. And I'm just going to call this a simple web job. And you'll notice here I'm using the .NET Framework 4.7.1. Currently, Dynamics platforms support the .NET Framework 4.6.2 and up. So as long as this is version 9. Now if you're using version 8x Dynamics, which in this particular instance, if you're using the online instances, you're going to be up to date, and you're going to be on the 9x instances, so you won't have to worry about that. So here we're using the .NET Framework 4.7.1. Once this creates our application, we get our project folder, and then we're going to tie into NuGet to get the various items that we need to go along with this product. So you see our project is initially created with our app config. Here, this is where we'll tie some things in later down the road in later episodes with maybe some Azure resources such as Azure Key Vault. For the time being, we'll say the app config will contain your connection string. It's a very basic XML file. Here we put in a connection string much like you would an ASP.NET application, but as you get to working with Azure resources, you may punch in key vault entries such as the application ID and its respective secrets, so you can get that secured connection, so that way your application doesn't actually contain any credential information. Then we've got our program where we'll do our coding. And again, this is a console application, so it's very basic. We'll look at the references. You'll notice here that we've got some references that are very basic out of the box. So what we want to do is we want to come in, we want to manage our NuGet packages. All right. Now when you come in and manage your NuGet packages, we're going to come in and we're going to browse, and we're going to look for Microsoft.crm. And we want the core tools and the core assemblies. So when we add the core tools, you'll notice here that we're looking at the version 9.0.2. Now this is going to align with our Dynamics instance of version 9x. If you're running on an older version, 8x, of course you would have the option to select an older instance, so you can tie into that respectively. We're going to go with the latest stable, and we'll go ahead and install that. And it's going to ask us to accept it. Of course we will. Now the next one that we do, it is going to ask us to install several others. Now you see that that one has installed. It refreshes our references, and we can now see our CRM SDK proxy. Now this other one is still in the CRM SDK. And you can actually see it in the list, but I'm going to bring it to the top of the list by saying XRM. And you can see here we've got our CRM SDK XRM tooling core assembly. This gives us the connector to be able to connect to our instance of Dynamics. Now here it pops up to the latest version. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it current with what we just got on the core assembly, and install that. Now when we install this one's going to do the same thing, ask us to accept it, and it's going to list several other items that we need to install. So we get the workflow, we get the identity model for Active Directory, and the tooling connector, the XRM core assembly. So we accept that and pull that in, and we've now got our base project for tying in to our Dynamics instance. You can add various other items here. So now what we're going to do, we've got our project set up. You'll notice in the references we've got our CRM SDK proxy, we've got our identity model, we've got our XRM SDK, we've got our SDK deployment, our workflow, our tooling connector, and of course we've got support for Newtonsoft JSON, which is really great. Previously there wasn't a whole lot of support for JSON parsing, so now we finally got that. And that pretty much covers this for right now. So what I'm going to do, I don't want to overwhelm us right now. So what we'll do is we'll step back in and review what we've got. So for our tools, we want to get an instance of Dynamics. You can again get that from trials.dynamics.com. You also want to get the XRM toolbox. The XRM toolbox has tools for data migration. It's got tools for code generation. It's very handy in customization of Dynamics development. Visual Studio will be very integral in developing on the Microsoft stack. It ties in nicely with Dynamics development. It ties in nicely with Azure development. And of course, you want your Azure subscription because you want to be able to develop your Azure APIs. You want to develop your web jobs, and you want to be able to develop your function apps. So again, thank you for joining me for part 1 of Dynamics tools and web job development. Please check back again within a week And I should have part 2 of Dynamics Development Web Jobs coming at you again. If you like the content, if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you again soon.